So today I'm looking at the Battle of Marj Dabiq and how this one battle turned the Ottoman Empire into a global superpower. And this video is from the Great History March, and I don't know anything about this battle. So without any further ado, let's get to it, shall we?
A day of destiny dawns on a scorching August day at Marj Dabiq. The Ottoman soldiers under Sultan Selim I finger their swords and guns as the dust from the hooves of the Mamluk cavalry ominously fills their horizon. In a battle finally realized after years of intrigue and rivalry, the Mamluk Sultan advances his eager men forward to strike the first blows against the army of the Ottoman upstart Sultan. This decisive engagement of history would decide which power would be the true champion of Islam and whether Ottoman ascendancy would be brutally checked by their rivals or triumphantly confirmed. The uncertain war between the Ottomans and the Mamluk.
Yeah, I have to say that when we covered the rise of the Ottomans, that some of the big Islamic superpowers I remember that kings and generals explained were the Mamluks of Egypt, the Timurid Empire, and the Ottomans. Those were kind of the big three. So we're no strangers to the Mamluks, and it seems like now we're gonna focus on their confrontation with the Ottomans. As the Ottomans, I assume this is the battle that makes them the main Islamic power of the world, if that makes sense, you know?
The reign of Mehmed II was undoubtedly a golden period of Ottoman history. However, the conqueror of Constantinople and much besides left more than his glorious legacy for his successor to deal with. Mehmed's reign also oversaw the centralization of the imperial bureaucracy, as well as a general centralization of political power, the mighty Sultan exclusively appointing those only faithful to him. The constant wars spurred resentment in the Janissaries, who had often campaigned even into the winter months. Mehmed's wars also had to be funded somehow, and this was accomplished through repeated debasement of the silver coinage, as well as rising customs duties and taxation levied on the poorer agricultural folk. Mehmed.
Yeah, war ain't cheap, guys. I mean, granted, you could make money from war if you, defeat a powerful enemy and make them, give conditions, right? Pay reprimations, war indemnities, etc. If you win. That's sometimes how armies, but that requires you to win against very powerful and rich enemies, right? And that's the thing, though. Eventually, there's a thing called war weariness, kind of like with Alexander the Great, who I feel like at least Mehmed could kind of be compared to, at least in their aspects of just wanting to keep conquering stuff. People got kind of tired of Alexander after a while. I mean, mainly his upper generals and even some of his soldiers, as they started questioning after the fall of Persia, why are we still fighting Alexander? Why are we going here? Not wanting to fight anymore, especially when they see things more stable, etc. It seems like while that issue was kind of boiling with Alexander, I could see it affecting other great conquerors such as Mehmed here, so that caught my interest and kind of reminded me of that. And yeah, again, war ain't cheap, so having to kind of keep, requiring manpower plus the means to fund the wars. Usually you hear of taxation and that going up, so yeah, that would explain a big cause of why people would get upset, right?
Had also effectively seized some 20,000 villages and farms held as private property and redistributed them as timars. In sum, these policies pushed many to the brink of revolt. As a remedy, support coalesced around Mehmed's eldest son, Bayezid, so that when Mehmed II breathed his last in 1481, the Janissaries within Constantinople rejected the installment of the younger son, Jem, as Sultan. Though initially successful in taking the cities in Anatolia, Bayezid ultimately defeated and forced Jem's exile, first to the Mamluks, then to the Knights Hospitaller in Rhodes.
Sam would eventually be surrendered to Charles of France and died in Naples. Cool he didn't kill his brother, considering that, Mehmed kind of legalized fratricide. It was kind of expected for brothers to just straight up murder each other. So, it's interesting he didn't just kill his brother or whatever. Or at least... wait, he just said he... Either way,
Before he was finally settled in the papal court as useful leverage for the papacy against the Ottoman Sultan. Meanwhile, Bayezid renounced his father's aforementioned policies and quickly consolidated his own hold on power. Despite his assistance in securing the Sultanate, Bayezid had Gedik Ahmed assassinated, the latter keen to continue Mehmed II's push into Italy. Desiring to win his own reputation with the army, Bayezid elected to take on the Principality of Moldova.
Okay, Bayezid also gained Venetian possessions of Morea, Greece during 1499 to 1503 conflict.
His great father had never fully subjugated it, and now Bayezid secured great success, taking Achaemen and Kilia in 1484. Yet though success was enjoyed in the west, to the east the situation was deteriorating. Though Jem had fled to the Mamluks, they had been careful not to afford him the usual courtesy and pomp due to a sultan. The meeting between Qaitbay and Jem was held in the courtyard of Cairo's citadel and not in the throne room. The Mamluk Sultan also failed to stand in Jem's presence, another conspicuous sign of support for Bayezid. Despite all of this, Qaitbay's conduct towards Jem was mixed at best, allowing the Ottoman pretender the freedom of Cairo, and indeed Jem stayed unmolested in Egypt for several months, something Bayezid likely frowned upon. In 1482, Jem made another bid for the Ottoman throne. The Mamluk Sultan declined to offer any material support for the pretender, but did allow his attempt.
Yeah, he's giving mixed signals, is he? On one hand, he's like, well, kind of treating Sem with sort of like cold detachment, aloofness, but at the same time allowing him to just kind of go around with no issue. And then allowing this, it almost seems like he's trying to toe the line, you know what I mean? Kind of like, no, I could kind of let things happen, but also claim that I'm not accountable for anything. I don't know, that's kind of the vibe I'm getting, Like, very mixed signals if you ask me personally.
Jem was once more defeated in August of that year.
Okay, Sem was offered a pension to retire to Jerusalem in exchange for his renouncing of his claim, but refused, fleeing to the Knights Hospitaller.
Beginning his long role as a diplomatic weapon for Western powers. Qaitbay's neutral stance was, with hindsight, a huge strategic error, given rising tensions over eastern Anatolia. The Ottomans had also never been shy about their ambitions of one day
Since former Roman territories included Syria and the Holy Land, the implication of the Ottoman claim to be the inheritors of Rome was clear, yeah. Yeah, I've heard about this. I think I've heard some people say that Mehmed claimed to be Rome just by conquest, because, he took Rome, therefore he's the successor of Rome, or the continuation of Rome. I think he may have called himself Rome. If so, no, none of you are Rome. You can't kill someone and take their identity. That's identity theft, sir. But to be fair, everyone's trying to commit identity death with Rome. Everyone's, ever since, even before the Byzantines fell, people were claiming to be the new Rome, the next Rome. And then after the Byzantines fell, we've just had countless people being like, oh, who's the true successor of Rome? Well, I don't think there is, because Rome's dead. There's only one Rome. I'm sorry, that might be my hot take, guys. I'm not sure if that's popular or not, but there's only one Rome. They have no successors, and they never will. So we can all let's just drop we're all the new Rome, you know? Or maybe I'll just throw in my bid one of these days. I'll be like, I'm the new Rome, you know? Sorry, it's just we keep seeing that so much in history. Like, guys, let it go. Rome's dead. But yeah, I'm sorry.
Controlling the holy places of their faith and ruling as the uncontested premier Muslim power. By the later 15th century, the Mamluks broadly adopted a conservative and defensive stance, working to ensure the integrity of their borders rather than on expansion. Applied to a potential invasion of Syria, this consisted in holding the key passes of the Taurus Mountains, as well as controlling the fords and crossing points of the Euphrates River. Another important plank in their defensive strategy was their subordination of the Turkoman tribes residing in Cilicia, and thus their indirect control over the passages through the mountains. Finally, Karaman's existence as an allied, or at the least an Ottoman hostile neighbor, also soothed concerns over an invasion from the north.
There are a lot of defensive positions, I must say, that the Mamluks have. Obviously, securing the Taurus Mountains here, having an ally here, consolidating, you know, control over the river here. And Egypt just naturally is always in history kind of been really good at defensive, at least if they're going through Syria. Like, oftentimes, like, in the past, Egypt has been able to fortify itself incredibly well. If it has like the resources to be very great in terms of defense. So all these factors make a defensive war very plausible, and you know, it can happen if it's done well and executed well, you know, with resources and manpower. But I'm gonna guess it's not gonna be, because this is the battle that turns the Ottoman Empire into a global superpower.
By 1484, it became clear that Bayezid had designs on the Cilician region, and though Kite Bey once more sought to avoid war by sending an embassy to Constantinople, by June the following year, the Ottomans were moving on the cities of Sis and Tarsus. Marching a hastily assembled force north to confront the army of Bayezid, the Mamluks under Uzbek scored a crushing victory outside of Adana. This kick-started several years of conflict in which the Ottomans were ultimately checked in their designs of subsuming Cilicia.
Wow, okay, that's surprising. We do know about, you know, the prowess of the Ottoman army. The fact that the Mamluks were able to at least defeat them and check them kind of goes to show that the Mamluks were still pretty strong at this point, you know what I mean? So yeah, that's interesting.
By 1491, and after 6 campaigns, the tiring powers concluded a treaty confirming the pre-war borders. Unfortunately for the Mamluks, this only bought them a few more years of peace. In the year after the conflict, plague ravaged the land and killed some 200,000 people in Cairo alone.
Oh my god.
Unsettling visions of the
poor Egypt. Egypt has been struck by a lot of plagues. I think throughout the videos we've seen, like, a lot happens in Egypt. Egypt's always getting hit with random plagues, sapping its manpower. Like, we've seen this several times in this channel. This place can't catch a break, can it?
Prophet himself were reported, as well as tales of jinn sent by Allah to punish the wicked. Compounding the general pessimistic atmosphere, were food riots. At court, the elderly Sultan's health was markedly on the decline, a horse riding accident weakening him further. This, along with the death due to plague of many of his more competent and trusted officials, encouraged a culture of infighting at court. Alas, though the aged Sultan was a great man, his long reign was unable to arrest Mamluk decline. He had achieved a respite for a time by driving the Ottomans out of Cilicia, but the issues of corruption, plague, a terrible economy, and above all else, the unceasing ascension in power of the Ottomans was not something he could deal with. Qaid Bey's son did briefly succeed him, but he was assassinated on the 31st of October, 1498. His death was followed by the brief reigns of 3 more sultans, before the eventual ascension of Al-Ashraf Kansu al-Ghauri in April of 1501. Meanwhile, though Jem's existence in the lands of the Knights Hospitaller of Rhodes and then the papacy did temper Bayezid's own policies, especially towards the European powers, the threat of his release was removed with his death in February of 1495. The Venetian War proved successful in driving the Republic out of its holdings in the Peloponnese, and also showcased that the Ottomans were now a true naval rival. Though Otranto and its garrison had been effectively abandoned on the ascension of Bayezid, the Sultan was also a clear and potent player in the Italian sphere. From around the turn of the century onwards, Bayezid's administrative policies began to heighten tensions in Anatolia among certain groups. Potent Turkoman peoples in the steppes, Taurus Mountains, as well as in the regions of Tokat and Sivas, were staunchly opposed to Ottoman centralization and its systemic taxation. Throw into this toxic mix the strong adherence of these Turkoman groups to Shiite Islam, and the region was certainly a powder keg primed to explode. Adhering to a form of Islam starkly apart from the orthodox Sunni form of the Ottoman establishment, the so-called Kizilbash or Redheads, derived from the red-colored head garment they wore, were crushed by Mehmed II following his defeat of Uzun Hasan in 1473. In around 1500, one Ismail Safavi set about overthrowing the Akka-Yunus, vanquishing the last sultan in 1503. With the Safavid Empire established under a similarly heterodox religious leader, the Turkoman malcontents in Anatolia now had a powerful nexus around which to oppose their Ottoman overlords. With thousands of angry Turkoman adherents to Ismail in Ottoman lands, the situation in the east had become precarious, to say the least.
Yeah, this is the interesting thing about the Ottomans, especially when we saw the rise of the Ottoman Empire series, is that, you know, I think that they always had trouble with the East in terms of, like, you know, there's always a lot of the Turkish groups, like, obviously we established in that series, migrated here to Anatolia, and, you know, the Ottomans were just one of several until they rose up and became, you know, ultra powerful. And, you know, even the first Bayezid had issues with he quickly conquered Anatolia, but many of these other previously independent Turkic groups kind of ended up turning on him, right, when he fought Timur. And, you know, the Ottomans kind of had to play more of a slower game with Anatolia and eastward expansion than they did here, because for the most part it seems like they had a really stable hold here in their European half with the Balkans and etc. But they always kind of had to there's always rebellions here in Anatolia, always, you know, them having to be really careful in this half. And as you know, as we established with Timur earlier, many of the groups here joined the next powerful group with Timur. So seems like history's sort of repeating with Ismail. Like, you can just kind of see these trends, right? Yeah.
Boldly made it known, like Timur and Uzan Hasan prior, that he would annex Anatolia into his own domains. To test the viability of his ambitions, Ismail sent his brother to raid the province of Salim, son of the Sultan, in 1505. Salim managed to drive him out with much bloodshed, even prompting Shah Ismail to complain of the ferocity of Salim's counter-raids in western Safavid territory. Bayezid declined to return the weapons seized by his son, but did attempt to secure peace by sending rich gifts to Ismail. Salim was not as forgiving. As governor of Trabzon and a champion of Sunni Islam, Salim took it upon himself to counter both the influence and propaganda of Ismail, proclaiming the infidel dog deserved a beating of his master. Salim went further by raiding Shiite villages within Ottoman territory. Salim's stance against both his foreign and domestic foes was hampered by a lack of real support from Constantinople. His father's actions made it clear he was not interested in a war to the east, perhaps countenancing further conflict in the west and south. Salim, however, was the man at ground zero in the east and mirrored his father's indifference, but towards these distant threats to the south and west. For him, the Safavids were the prime concern. Standing in stark contrast to his aging and conciliatory father, Salim scored another victory in 1507 at Erzincan, and then further checked Safavid power 3 years later in the same area that had been targeted half a decade before. By the final years of Bayezid's reign, it would be the Safavid issue that would ultimately decide the bloody succession to the Ottoman throne. With familial relations already frosty given Salim's pro-war stance as opposed to his father's desire for peace, Salim garnered much support from the soldiery of the empire. His two half-brothers, Ahmed and Korkut, were favored by Bayezid, with the former in particular gifted the province of Amasya. With his brother thus installed in the family's old stronghold, Ahmed was clearly a figure of continuity of Bayezid's policies, this elder prince cultivating bonds with the top imperial administrators and military men. As if to emphasize his own status as the most aggressive of Bayezid's sons, Salim led a punitive expedition into Christian Georgia in 1508.
I am making a raid against the Georgian infidels who are in my vicinity. Let those young men and brave fellows who delight in plunder come.
Capturing some 10,000 women and children for enslavement. As an ally and sometime vassal of the Safavid enemy, Salim's campaign into Georgia served multiple functions. It brutally demonstrated to the greater foe that he was more than willing to use force of arms to crush the empire's enemies. His Georgia...
Yeah, that's interesting about Salim. He is very, I guess the word I would use is aggressive. He's very aggressive with his policy. And, you know, essentially using a lot more might to get the point across. And, you know, just really wants to take down the Safavids. And, I kind of find that a bit funny, but it's that spirit and attitude which shows me that he's gonna get the one up. Cause while, you know, Bayezid wants to be more diplomatic, I feel like Salim has kind of that aggression that a lot of the early Ottoman great rulers had. You know, that real go-getter, won't back down in the face of anyone kind of attitude that a lot of the early Ottoman rulers exhibited. So, yeah, I think he reminds me a lot of them. And that tells me that he's going to, he's obviously poking the bear, because I'm pretty sure he wants a battle. He wants a war, and he can't seem to be checked by anyone. So he might just get it.
Adventure was further evidence he was a man apart from both his pro-peace father and favoured half-brother Ahmed. Salim's prestige could thus only be enhanced by the campaign in the eyes of the soldiery, and after making clear his own ambitions for a more aggressive future, his newly enriched and eager supporters in his men now spread enthusiasm for Salim as a desirable alternative to Ahmed. Bayezid, for his part, merely ramped up support for his favourite son. In
I love they're having this PR battle. Yeah, but Salim seems to live by the motto, peace was never an option, you know? Yeah, now they're just straight up having a PR battle. Bayezid doesn't even want him to like, seems to not want Salim to get any power, you know?
11, matters were further complicated with a pro-Safavid rebellion in western Anatolia.
Beginning as a traveling religious figure, Shakulu gained wide support, even claiming to be the Shiite prophet. Some supporters went further, claiming he was the Messiah. Wow.
In reaction to the growing support for Ismail within Ottoman borders was to relocate many of these people to farther-flung areas of the empire, away from direct Safavid influence. One such large group was placed in Tekke. The trouble was led by a charismatic agent of Ismail on April the 9th. Sakulu and his following had an easy time picking off Ottoman settlements, barracks, and gathering livestock and plunder from their hiding places in the rugged terrain of southeastern Anatolia. Tekke's governor, another son of Bayezid, was absent in Manisa, a closer position to Constantinople from which to launch his own bid for the throne should his aging father die. Ottoman forces chased the rampaging Shiite rebels across southwestern Anatolia, but met with defeat at Kütahya.
Oh wow. The Ottoman army was outnumbered and routed. Karagöz Pasha was taken alive. He was then impaled on April 22nd in front of Kütahya before his body was beheaded and burned.
With Sakulu's men plundering and even destroying Sunni mosques and Qurans, Bayezid was anxious to make an example of this upstart and sent his Grand Vizier to take on the rebels. This decision also had a political dimension, as Hadim Ali Pasha led the pro-Ahmed faction, and though he directly led the military response, a big show was made of his contact with Ahmed in Amasya, clearly an attempt to build some gravitas with the army and people over Ahmed's lack of military experience in comparison to Salim.
I love, even at this point, there's still big political moves being played from Bayezid. He's like, no, guys, support my favorite son, please. See, look, he look at how involved he is. Wink. In this war, but in this rebellion rather.
Slipping away from Hadim at Kütahya, the Shiite army headed for Sivas. The Imperial Army suffered grave attritional casualties in its pursuit, and possibly even desertions, which weakened the Ottoman army when it came to blows in July. A few weeks later, the threat had effectively been neutralized, though Hadim had been killed, and likely Sakulu too had fallen, either in the fighting or during the retreat to Safavid territory of the majority of the rebel forces. Many Safavids were captured and resettled far from Ismail in the Peloponnese. However, most were greeted as heroes by Ismail himself in the summer. The Sarkulu rebellion reflected poorly upon both Bayezid and two of Selim's rivals for the throne. As Ahmed had been cast as the leader of the response, he was naturally blamed for the poor showing, failing to send reinforcements quick enough when needed.
Wait, how that backfired, eh?
Korkut too had revealed himself as inept and selfish, preferring residence in Manisa and arguably creating the vacuum in power that enabled the rebellion to begin with in his province. Selim, by contrast, shone as a clear, aggressive alternative to his brother and his father's pro-peace tendencies. Selim had for years warned that a more punitive approach was needed against Safavid influence, and now this need had been starkly demonstrated. A further blow was struck to Ahmed's faction when his own son Murad defected to the Safavids, attiring himself in the conspicuous red helm of the Kizilbash. This very public betrayal caused questions over Ahmed's suitability to rule an empire when control of his own son was apparently beyond him. Perhaps sensing this ominous turn in attitude towards Ahmed, Bayezid prepared to abdicate in favor of him. Word inevitably leaked to both Korkut and Selim, the latter making his own preparations as he installed his own son as governor of Kefa.
At Wayfair, we get pretty excited.
Selim ultimately met Bayezid in
Holy
battle
crap.
at Korlu, and though defeated, he rallied his hopes in Crimea.
Holy crap. Dude, Selim does not know the meaning of chill. Like, the guy lives by the motto, peace is never an option, and he's like, just... he really just went to go fight his dad right now. He was like, no, I don't agree, I'm gonna go fight you now. Yo, dude, the guy does not know how to chill. And friggin' Bayezid, he's like scrambling. He's like, I need to get Ahmed on the throne, no matter what. Like, he is desperate to get his favorite son, you know, in the position of power, right?
Before gathering a new army of Janissaries behind him. With news of Ahmed's march to Constantinople, pro-Selim and Ahmed supporters clashed in the capital, though Selim's finally compelled Bayezid's acceptance of his younger son as his successor. Selim formally compelled Bayezid's abdication on April 24th, 1502, and over the next few months eliminated his brothers, cornering Korkut in Manisa, and then the enraged Ahmed, who sought to conquer Anatolia in retribution for his lost throne. He was defeated at Yenishir and later on strangled. With the throne...
Again, the fratricide aspect is so brutal, but like, we've seen it so much in history, right? It's like, man... It was, it's brutal, but the world's just a brutal world, man. But you gotta do what you gotta do, right? Man, it all worked out for Selim. Again, he took the initiative, therefore he wins, you know?
Finally secured, Selim set about dealing with his long-term enemy, the Safavids. They had thrown their support behind the conciliatory Ahmed during the succession struggle, and even harbored Murad, his son. Using their occupation of the city and province of Diyarbakir as a casus belli, Selim also had his own scholars brand the Safavids as heretics, and thus open to attack. Selim closed his vast territory to Safavid trade, while also sending word south to his other great regional rivals, the Mamluks. In 1514, the septuagenarian Sultan al-Ghawri was informed of Selim's plans and invited to either join in the war or stay out of the way. By April of the year, Selim marched out of Constantinople with an impressive force of around 140,000 men.
Holy crap.
The Ottoman Sultan arrived at Sivas at the beginning of July, making east and reaching the fringes of his empire at Erzincan by the end of the month. En route, the two leaders had exchanged insults and threats, Ismail essentially daring his rival to invade. Burning all before the invaders, Salim attempted to maintain supplies to his army at Erzurum through having ships sail from the capital to Trabzon and relaying supplies across land. However, the rough and roadless terrain proved too great an obstacle to adequately supply such a large army.
Logistics! But yes, do not underestimate the power of logistics. It can make or break you. And look, he's using he's using the scorched earth essentially, which is always effective. Like I have yet to see the scorched earth policy ever fully negated. Usually it's always effective. Like so far in this channel, I don't think we've seen an example. I'm sure there must be in history, but I'm just talking about just this channel in particular. We have yet to see a full counter to the scorched earth. It always wrecks big armies, you know. And Ismail has used it here and essentially got Salim in kind of a trap here. So yeah, Ismail ain't an idiot, it seems. Like he's kind of clever.
With little choice but to force a direct confrontation as his men grew more disgruntled, Salim learned that Ismail and the Safavids were encamped at Chaldaran to the east, and on August 22nd, he reached the place, hostilities commencing the next day.
Oh wow, so Ismail's actually giving him a battle? I think he might have done better if he had not, and just let Salim kind of wear himself out a bit more, but then again, probably looting and pillaging, right, would probably... I mean, he was already doing the scorched earth, it seems, so... I don't know. I think if he had gone with that more and just let Salim kind of wear himself out, probably would have been better. But it seems like he was maybe caught in to give a fight at this point. I'm not sure.
Fortunately for Salim, his army heavily outnumbered Ismail's Safavids. The Ottoman
and he has the power of artillery by his side. Look at that. I took note of the artillery in the opening.
Sultan fielding around 100,000 men, 12,000 of these musketeers, with 300 cannon carriages. The mostly cavalry force of Ismail numbered around 40,000.
Ooh.
Salim ordered an early attack given his numbers and wishing to deny Ismail time to receive reinforcements. The Ottomans initially pressed the Safavids back and up to the eastern high ground, where they held and loosened their formation to surround the masses of foes below. Seemingly having the Ottomans surrounded in the valley below, Ismail further boosted the courage of his men by supplying them wine, which apparently had the desired effect.
Let's get drunk! Like, no, I'm joking. Imagine they actually got drunk. I'm not sure how much they drank, but still though, that's pretty cool. Okay, so Ismail's doing some pretty interesting positioning here. He didn't fight them directly, he moved to higher ground, the always advantageous position, and immediately positioned his army to almost like it looks like it enveloped them, right? Like could have just surrounded them. And Salim noticed this too and immediately stopped and stopped the forward assault and now has moved back. But he does have artillery still though, which is a pretty big advantage if used correctly.
Streaming down upon their Ottoman foes, Ismail's confidence was misplaced. Salim's men formed tightly within the hollow Safavid ring. The cannons were set at out-facing angles with musketeers in support, and as the Safavid cavalry came to close, with infantry following from behind, a great hail of shot was unleashed to shred Ismail's warriors. With thousands of Safavid warriors falling and Ottoman cavalry engaging at other points too, the Safavids had no choice but to fall back. Though Ismail himself was said to have fought bravely, killing several enemy warriors, before himself having to withdraw with a wound to his hand. With the earth at Chaldaran stained with enemy blood, Salim cautiously held his men back from pursuit, fearing a possible trap. Though Ismail had escaped, thousands of his men had fallen, with a few of his closest councillors and several provincial governors among their number. Selim carefully advanced on Tabriz, whose residents freely surrendered to Ottoman authority. Occupying the city on September 5th, Selim fully expected to winter there and continue his dismantling of Ismail's empire.
Okay, so I was just gonna say, is the goal just to complete conquest, my guy? You're just gonna take the entire empire? I mean, don't get me wrong, that's pretty ambitious. And, you know, I'm just wondering if he has, like, the logistics, though. Logistics was an issue before, but I'm wondering if he, now that he has more territory under his rule, if he could, like, is it possible to live off the land or the resources of his newly conquered territory? I mean, I know there was some scorched earth going on, so I don't know. It's logistics that I'm wondering about, and if he's able to replenish his forces and keep them up. Logistics is really important. I played this game called Mount and Blade Warband, and when I first played many years ago, I assembled a pretty big army, but I didn't have the means to actually fund it and keep it, right? I was getting super broke, so I didn't, and the logistics were awful, to the point I just had to run around and keep looting villages and, like, raiding them just so I can get, like, food, but I needed these villages in the future for more manpower, so as you imagine, it was a complete mess. That's when I learned the power of logistics, you know what I mean? I'm sorry, just... some of my own exploits, my own campaigns, you know? When I was younger and less experienced.
Empire in the next campaigning season. However, upon hearing this, his exhausted men became mutinous. Reluctantly withdrawing west after just 8 days in the city, Selim had to content himself with the securing of his eastern border over the complete destruction of his foes. He also gained the key territory of Diyarbakir. Ismail himself had had his own aura of invincibility shattered at Chaldaran and degenerated into frequent drunkenness as his empire was undoubtedly weakened. With the Safavids neutralized, Selim could now focus his attention south to the other great power, and arguably the leading Sunni Muslim power, given their possession of both Mecca and Medina. The Mamluks, though undoubtedly in decline, still held these holy cities. This distinction one that Selim coveted for himself and his arguably more deserving empire.
It's the prestige of having the original Muslim lands where it all began, right? Alright. So he definitely did check Ismail, right? He kind of humbled him. So Ismail seems like he's just falling apart. Now he can focus on someone else.
Other reasons for his confrontation of the Mamluks was the very real possibility of a future alliance between them and the Safavids. Indeed, such a joint action against the rapidly expanding Ottomans would be wise from their perspective. Furthermore, the Mamluks, as they had with Jem years before, also welcomed one of Ahmed's sons. For the warlike Selim, such an affront could not be overlooked either. In the summer of 1515, as preparations for war ramped up, Selim left the Mamluk court in no doubt as to his intentions. He sent a small army to seize the buffer territory of Dul Qadir. Having captured the tribal confederation's leader, the Mamluks were sent his head in Cairo with an unambiguous declaration of war attached to it.
Again, Selim, man, the guy does not know the definition of the word chill. He is aggressive, and he ain't backing down. My goodness.
With war now inevitable, Al-Ghawri sent word to Ismail offering to join forces against their common enemy. However, the Mamluk Sultan had the misfortune of sending one of Selim's spies in the Mamluk Empire as his emissary. And soon after, the Ottoman Sultan sent word to Cairo, naming Al-Ghawri a stupid coward, furthermore gloating that his empire would soon be destroyed. The Mamluk Sultan took the threat seriously and quickly gave orders for every village to submit men for his army. Such a demand naturally led to many fleeing to avoid the draft, which emptied the farms of the labor needed to harvest the food, which was also the food the Sultan now demanded in greater amounts for his own needs.
Oh boy, this is already a disaster. A battle hasn't even started yet, and like already everything's falling apart.
This chaos and food shortage caused a near famine to spread from Cairo to Anatolia.
Oh my gosh.
To further compound Mamluk misfortunes, Ismail eventually sent word that no Safavid support would come. No significant numbers could be mustered following the shock of Chaldaran, and those that did march west were held back by Ottoman defenses in Diyarbakir. The Mamluks would have to face down the Ottoman juggernaut alone. On May 17, 1516, Al-Ghawri and his army set out from Cairo. Traveling mostly at night to avoid the unforgiving summer heat, they arrived at Jerusalem by mid-June. After a short break, the Mamluks continued north, still forcibly seizing supplies, food, and men.
The custom of throwing gold and silver coins at the Sultan's feet was observed in Damascus. Some desperate conscripts grabbed for them, almost toppling Al-Qawi from his horse, illustrating a dire situation for much of the people. Yeah, this seems like a complete disaster off the bat.
Matters darkened for Al-Ghawri's subjects in Aleppo. The Sultan's army entered it on July 10th, and proceeded to act more like a foreign occupying force than its sovereign protectors. Houses were stormed, occupied, and gutted, with the marketplace pilfered and any valuable resource seized. It seems the Mamluks were unaware at this stage that the governor of the ancient city was firmly Selim's man. As for Selim, he arrived in Elbastan in July and was joined by further men mustered in the area. By the 30th, he had heard that Al-Ghawri was marching towards him. The Mamluk army abused and jeered as they departed ravaged Aleppo. In contrast, Selim gave an inspiring speech, declaring that Allah himself wished that they take the holiest places for the empire. However, before this could happen, they would first have to take Syria. Departing Elbastan, they reached the vicinity of Antab, where they easily defeated a small band of Mamluks, taking some prisoners. Edging southward through the scorching heat, Selim's army finally reached Marj Dabiq, some 30 miles north of Aleppo, on the evening of August 23rd.
Alright, here we go.
Both forces numbered approximately
artillery! But yes, they have artillery. I just always want to point that out. Every time artillery appears, I'm just like, artillery?
60,000 men, though most of the Mamluk ranks were raw, untrained, and jittery conscripts held in reserve. Many of these were unwilling to fight at all, some deserting, others even maiming themselves to avoid combat or the front lines. The Mamluk left was broadly composed of the men of Aleppo, under the command of the governor of the city.
I'm sensing betrayal now. Okay, I'm sensing that maybe, this is my prediction, maybe Bey might turn on the Mamluks in the battle. That's what I'm guessing, if he really is under Selim's, thumb, if you would. I guess if he's really siding with him.
To the right.
Oh, and all these guys are gonna run away, by the way. These jittery conscripts, they don't have to resolve. I'm predicting they're gonna run away before they ever see combat.
Damascus, under the command of Sibey, while the center was under the overall command of Al-Ghawri himself, with Sudan leading the royal Mamluks. Opposing them were the determined ranks of Selim's army. The Ottoman cannons were placed in the center and shielded with carriages chained together to mitigate the likely Mamluk charges. Selim himself commanded the center of the Ottoman army, the Janissary units positioned to their left, while cavalry held the wings. Moving to engage, the Mamluk center under Sudan charged first with the royal Mamluks. Such was the strength and momentum of this initial charge that the center under Selim was fractured and pushed back, the Sultan managing to achieve a decent withdrawal behind the cannon barricade. Sudan's onslaught reached the artillery too, peppering the gunners with deadly arrow volleys while suffering retaliatory shots themselves. Next came the terrible charge of the Damascus group. They contacted the Ottoman cavalry left wing, pushing them back and then battering the grim ranks of the Janissaries. This sector of the battle was also bloody, the men of Sibey managing to take several Ottoman standards while cutting through the Ottoman ranks. This general melee persisted for the first hours of the battle. By midday, with the Ottoman Sultan pushed back and the fighting seemingly stabilized, Al-Ghawri chose to personally lead another charge. It was around this time that the first disaster struck the Mamluk forces. As both
I have to say, yeah, this was interesting in that the Mamluks managed to push the center back. Here, the right of the Mamluks seemed more bloody, obviously, and the left's kind of just been, you know, just a fight.
Sudan and Sibey fell, leaving their groups bloodied and leaderless, while the Sultan's charge lost its momentum. Meanwhile, Selim from his position decided this was a good moment to push his right wing forward. Around the same time, the Mamluk Sultan may have received his questionably loyal lieutenant and leader of the left wing, Kaya. He argued that surrender was the best option, as the Ottomans were moving to surround them. The Sultan was likely already suspicious of Kaya, so no decision was made then. However, while Al-Ghawri
Khair Bey would serve as Salim's advisor on all subjects Mamluk, and would nickname him the traitor by the Sultan. Oh, wow.
was guarded, word soon spread of the coming envelopment. With Salim's right wing closing in, Kaya's contingent melted away. A further rumor that
I like Khair would just jump him from the back, but yeah, he just seems to kind of be more pulling away.
Al-Ghawri had ordered his infantry reserves to remain where they were, exacerbated matters. The already jittery ranks now began to slip away too.
At least I got that right. If I got one thing right of this battle.
The septuagenarian Mamluk Sultan initially attempted to stiffen the resolve of his men.
I think he probably should have left. Okay, so he's gonna try to make a final stand. Yeah, I think this is where he gets killed, right? Assuming he gets killed, but this seems like a good opportunity for him to get killed.
This is the moment to take heart. Fight, and I will reward you. Alas, his words fell on deaf ears.
They're leaving. Honestly, same. I'd be like, well, nah, thanks. We're not the, we don't want to have a, final stand. I'd also book it. You kidding me?
Then, shortly after the words left his mouth, Al-Ghawri himself stiffened in the saddle, and one side of his body fell into paralysis.
Oh.
Demanding water, which was given in a golden goblet, Al-Ghawri drank before turning to flee, but then falling to the earth as the Ottomans closed in. Though accounts differ as to the exact
My goodness. Yeah, probably should have gotten out right away, dude.
manner of the Mamluk Sultan's demise, what was not in any doubt was the victory of the Ottomans. Following the battle, Syria lay open to Ottoman conquest. The tattered survivors of the disaster attempted re-entry into Aleppo, but the city's 9 gates were closed against him. Kaya Bey was now openly declaring his allegiance to Selim, and on the 28th, the Ottoman Sultan entered Aleppo in triumph. In a symbolic changing of authority, that Friday's prayers in Aleppo's mosques were uttered in the name of Selim. In Egypt, Al-Ghawri's successor Tuman Bey refused to bend the knee. Having been proclaimed servant of Mecca and Medina, while the Abbasid Caliph Mutawakkil looked on, Selim marched south, ultimately meeting Tuman Bey at the Battle of Raydania in January of 1517. With the last Mamluk Sultan's execution after this, all of Syria, Egypt, and the Hejaz accepted Ottoman overlordship. The Battle of Marj Dabiq was thus a pivotal moment in the long history of both the Ottoman Empire and the Middle East. Before it, Ottoman supremacy as the greatest Muslim power was still arguable. Now, with the keys of the holy cities in Ottoman possession, it was undeniable.
Yeah, Selim seems to be the guy who finally solidified the Ottomans as the primary Islamic Muslim power. Wow.
If you enjoyed watching Attack...
Okay, footnote 1. The conquest of the Mamluks by Selim was the largest military venture any Ottoman Sultan had ever attempted. Egypt proved extremely profitable for the empire as it produced more tax revenue than any Ottoman territory and supplied about 25% of all food consumed. Meanwhile, Mecca and Medina officially made Selim and his descendants the caliphs of the entire Muslim world by the early 20th century. Until the early 20th century. After the battle, Mamluk culture and social organization persisted as a regional level, and the hiring and education of Mamluk slave soldiers continued, but the ruler of Egypt was an Ottoman governor protected by an Ottoman militia. Conquest of Egypt opened Africa for further Ottoman expansion. Overall, yeah, Selim, man, he solidified the Ottoman prestige in the Muslim world. That's really cool, actually. Like, this was good. I'm kind of glad we watched the Rise of the Ottoman Empire series before this, because it all kind of fits in really well.